A land broken. A plane cursed. Eldraine had endured much in its history, but in the aftermath of the Phyrexian invasion, we would see great strife plague the realms and the wilds alike. Eldraine is a place where fantastical stories are the lives of ordinary folk, but with that too comes the wicked curses cast by evil witches. For every brave hero clad in shining armor, there's a towering foe or deadly dragon preying on a terrified populace. In Wilds of Eldraine, not all heroes are virtuous, not all quests are glorious, and doing the right thing is always up for interpretation. As the wicked slumber descends on its people, a kingdom fractured must see a new hero rise from calamity, as a house divided topples down. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Ether Hub. I'm Simon, bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. As we prepare for Wilds of Eldraine's release, we bring you the complete story of this set. If you didn't catch everything about Eldraine's latest lore, you can find it right here in this comprehensive video. With this, you'll be prepared for any lore discussions you may find yourself in at your next Friday Night Magic. Before we begin, I just want to shout out the author of this story, Arsenault Rivera, who did a wonderful job crafting a whimsical tale befitting of Eldraine. A link to the official story site where you can read her complete work can be found in the video's description. I also want to thank Wizards of the Coast for directly sponsoring today's video. As an MTG ambassador, I'm happy to be working with them to bring you all the story of Magic the Gathering. Much like the new roles mechanic introduced in Wilds of Eldraine, you too can craft a story with every card you play. Find the role most befitting your deck and create your own story moments. Start making your own fairy tale with Wilds of Eldraine using my link found in the description below. I used the new card image gallery by Wizards of the Coast for a lot of the content in today's video. Go check it out on their main website, again, linked below. If you enjoy our content here at the Ether Hub, don't forget to leave this video a like, share it with friends, and become a subscriber. It all goes a long way in helping this channel grow. Now, let's get into the lore. There was a king who dwelled in Eldraine, with a queen by his side and 4 children. Those who lived within the kingdom were content, knowing they would remain in good hands for generations to come. But the king and queen were dead now, slain defending their family and castle. All of their virtue and all of their defenses meant nothing to the Phyrexian invasion. Those who thought to live long lives in peace now lie in mass graves below the heaths and meadows. Eldraine and the white-aligned realm of Ardenvale needed a new king, and Rowan Kenrtih took the title. The knights who fought in the invasion now called Will the Boy King, and his twin sister Rowan couldn't blame them. The twins had come to see one of those knights, who had a scarred face and dented armor telling of her valor. She held a hammer the size of the Boy King himself in one hand. The other arm had been lost in battle against the Phyrexians, replaced now with enchanted wood, a gift from the fae. For the past 6 months, this knight had been demanding tribute from nearby villages in exchange for driving off raiders, but the raiders in question always seemed to be wearing her colors. Will addresses this warrior, Sir Imodaine, who sits on her makeshift throne, said to be made from the bodies of dissembled Phyrexians. She insists Will calls her Queen Imodaine, while Will dons the mask of diplomacy, agreeing to talk as equals. Queen Imodaine laughs, echoed by her raiders, and refuses to take Will, this boy king, seriously. She sees the young royal as pathetic. No one saw him on the battlefield when the Phyrexians came. Rowan, Will's sister, her anger boiling, knowing that they were fighting their own battles inside the castle, but Will remains calm and smiles. He challenges Queen Imodaine to a duel. If Will won, then Queen Imodaine would quit raiding and bend the knee, becoming a vassal and champion to the crown. Yet, if Imodaine won, then Will's family and court would follow her instead, handing over the crown and the right to rule all of Eldraine to her. Rowan offers to fight for him, unsure if this duel would be evenly matched, yet Will refuses. Rowan knew their father or mother could have solved this problem, but Will? If he lost, he would lose more than just blood. She couldn't openly defy her brother and make him seem foolish. He was the new High King and needed to prove himself. They moved to a patch of packed dirt designated as a battleground, Queen Imodaine's rebels sitting to watch. To Rowan, they seemed happier than the Knights of Ardenvale, whose faith and loyalty belonged to their old king, her father, and not necessarily to Will. A bugle sounded the beginning of the duel, and Rowan thought back to her childhood watching duels from her father's knee. She asked questions about everything she saw back then, determined to be a knight herself one day. Her father watched her tilt for the first time, his heart swelling with joy. But Phyrexia had taken that from her, taken her father from her. When she watches Will take his stance, her imagination projects their father's shadow over him, a barbed monstrosity over Queen Imodaine. Imodaine makes the first move, advancing with her giant hammer. Will blasts the ground with ice, and the momentum causes her to fall face first. Whatever hope they had for an honorable duel was gone. Even her rebels couldn't help but laugh. Flame bursts from Imodaine's hammer, melting the ice on the field. She swings it overhead, and Will throws himself to the side like a complete and utter novice. Rowan's throat grows tight. Imodaine can raise her hammer faster than Will can get up. All the anger Rowan felt while watching her father die, and all the sorrow she felt afterward, coursed through her. To name what then leaves her fingertips a bolt of lightning would be like calling a cauldron a thimble. Dark clouds recede to let the lightning through, the crack bringing everyone to their knees. When the dust settles, Rowan realizes what she's done. She cut a massive rift into the side of the nearest peak. Generations from now we'll call it Stormcutter Mountain. Rowan stares from her hand to the massive rift in disbelief. Her brother, and even Queen Imodaine, gaped their mouths in terror. Rowan doesn't know what to say, so she stands tall and unsheaths her sword. Queen Imodaine drops her hammer, turns tail, and runs into the woods. Will asks her what she's done, and Rowan only answers that he should have let her fight. He wasn't trained for this. Imodaine may have fled, but her warriors now drew their swords, all looking to earn a name for themselves. Will and Rowan's home, Castle Ardenvale, lies in charred ruins. Will takes up residence in the neighboring blue-aligned castle, Vantress. Will sits in the war room, buried beneath a mound of paperwork, alliances, tax arrangements, oaths of fealty, and blistering commendations. It was clear to Rowan how all of this had worn on her brother, seeing the bags under his eyes and stubbly chin. She announces that she's leaving, and Will advises her not to think with her sword arm, nagging her more than their father ever did. Rowan had a speech planned, but now she found the words had changed. She thought leaving was the best thing she could do for the realm right now, before word spread about what happened at the cliffs. Will's cold words cut her off, reading a letter aloud that said the Marquis of Roxburgh would not bend the knee to a man who lets his sister inflict such harm on others. He met Rowan's eyes, telling her there are more letters of the same. They could have avoided this, if only she had trusted him. Pain pricked her temple. A headache she'd been dealing with lately wore on her patience. She told her brother he would be dead if she didn't interfere. Her brother wasn't the true king. He hadn't gone on the high quest. The high quest was given by the questing beast to candidates who hoped to be worthy to lead the realms. Their father had completed it, but after his death, Will simply took the crown when Ardenvale needed a king. He didn't always want his sister to save him. He had a plan to unite Eldraine, but blasting a hole in a mountain was no one's idea of unity. Will argued that what she'd done wasn't what their parents would have wanted. Rowan's anger burst. Their parents wouldn't have ignored a curse that spread through the kingdom. Maybe this wicked slumber was unity, but all those inflicted would need more than a handshake and a cup of ale to wake up. Their parents had earned their titles, and Will called himself High King because he thought it suited him no matter how much Rowan told him otherwise. Rowan knows she's gone too far, but she's fine with it, as long as they found a way to solve the problem. The wicked slumber had stopped the Phyrexians in their tracks, but now it spread to the citizens of Eldraine. They fell asleep and nothing could ever wake them, neither true love's kiss or a bucket of ice water. Castle Vantress's finest minds had not figured out how to wake the dreamers, but they didn't have access to the multiverse. The twins do. For all of their differences, they share one thing between them: their spark. Will argued that he had to stay on Eldraine as High King. His difference of opinion kept Rowan from planeswalking away. Rowan strains against her brother's power, trying to override his control over their spark. She closes her eyes and once more sees the long halls of Castle Ardenvale, her father fighting a Phyrexian behemoth, her stepmother Linden and their siblings running away. She heard Linden's voice telling her to keep them safe and live well. Rowan knows how the story ends and doesn't want to see it. Rowan's chest feels tight. Whenever she closes her eyes, she sees their father dead on the end of a Phyrexian blade. She couldn't clear her mind enough to planeswalk. Their spark didn't seem to respond. In fact, she couldn't feel it at all. Her brother could stay if he wanted to, but she was going one way or another. Rowan Kenrtih ventures across the valleys and into the wilds atop a stout horse. Luckily, the small folk take her in and offer what little they have. In the wee hours of night, they find her awake, still searching for a cure for the wicked slumber. Royce, the Weaver, her host tonight, warned her that sleep would come for her eventually, whether she liked it or not. If Rowan was determined to continue her quest, she should go to a castle not far from where they stayed, where a lord had died long ago. As the woman describes the castle, she lets it slip that Rowan's kind wouldn't remember the lord. Rowan's kind? She thought. Royce smiles as moonlight plays upon her skin and her glamour breaks, revealing 8 eyes and many more arms than any human should have. Through chittering mandibles, Royce reminds Rowan that she had promised shelter and food. They were not enemies. Rowan relaxed, but still wouldn't sleep, and spent the night learning a little of weaving from Royce instead. In the morning, Royce was seeing Rowan off, wishing her good fortune. When Rowan reaches the castle, she finds crumbling walls and ancient parapets. Dust chokes her, and undead servants rise to meet her blade as she hacks her way into a library. There were no lost secrets here, only what looters had left behind. With her having come all this way, there was nothing. Rowan's anger boils, imagining what her brother Will might say if he could see her failure. Her body begins to shake, and she realizes she's weeping. Against all reason, Rowan finds a bed, remembering Royce's warning, but she was just so weary. Rowan collapses on the rough mattress, and the dream swallows her. In this dream, she walks through the castle, but it's whole and new. There are bards and dancers in the halls. Fair women and handsome men led her further. A squire removes her armor, and a warm robe is draped over her shoulders. A tankard of mead is thrust into her hand, as she finds a table at this delightful feast. Her father and mother stand at the head of the table, spreading their arms toward her, glad to see that she made it. There they were. No scars or wounds, just alive and happy. Rowan runs to her father, who lifts her up and spins her. Her stepmother is there too, dabbing the tears from her eyes. They were so proud of Rowan, who had come so far to see them. Rowan opens her mouth, but cannot speak, not even when her father asks if she seeks their counsel. Even though she cannot answer, King Kenrtih knows what she seeks and takes the crown from his head and places it atop her own. He tells her to go to their home of Castle Ardenvale. Their blood awaits her there. Rowan wakes in the ruins of the castle, seeing the sunlight filter through the dust. Alone, surrounded by cold and death, she allows herself to weep again. She will go to Castle Ardenvale. Rowan read the letter from her twin brother Will. He knew she was angry. He understood. He wished he could help. If Will actually understood and wanted to help, he would be here, in this Wheeldrum Tavern with her. Instead, Rowan sits alone, thinking about her response. She was right to be angry. Their world had been turned upside down, and Will wanted to sit at home and wait for answers to just appear. Why was he so afraid of her for not wanting to wait? For wanting to take action? Rowan folds the empty paper and hands it to the courier, and declares her only message for Will was to come find her when he's serious. What awaits Rowan is the remains of Castle Ardenvale, once her home and the seat of the High King and Queen Kenrtih, her departed parents. Now a veil of violet mist lay over the hills and valleys, concealing the metal bodies of the fallen Phyrexians beneath. It was they who took everything from her, but now they littered the ground so that Rowan had to take great care where she stepped. Yet Rowan didn't take great care. She blasts a hole in the oaken gates with lightning from her palm and climbs the violet-cloaked stairs. Rowan only takes a few steps before she sees knights. Knights she recognizes, wearing the plate helms and colors of Ardenvale. They stand with weapons ready, the slumber's mist hanging around them. Like a puppeteer pulling the strings, the mists control her comrades. Rowan's former archery instructor loses an arrow that whistles past her head. Rowan readies her blade, battle seeming to be the only option. Two men she had known attack with an axe and hammer. Pain ignites. Her old headache returns as if summoned. A blast of lightning sends the men flying backwards and Rowan ducks under another arrow. Her head is ringing. Sorrows of a heavy crown as she advances to meet more old companions, now intent on breaking her bones. She tries her best to not seriously injure them, but at times she needs to let loose other blasts of lightning, whose damage potential to flesh is quite substantial. Each one leaves a bigger crater behind, and each one feels more thrilling. Rowan would like to deny it, but it was easy to lose control. She makes it to the top of the stairs to find more knights, though now they stood under a foreign banner. They wore courtroom finery instead of armor, but held weapons in hands at the ready. A plush violet carpet led Rowan's eyes beyond the knights to a veil of shifting shadow. She expects the knights to attack her, and they do, though not like she expects. Instead of charging, they waltz towards her. Couples part to slash at her and then return to their strange dance. Rowan dodges and blocks, but in doing so, she's pulled into the swirling dance, slumbering knights twirling all around her. Her sword is lifted from her hands, but she cannot move without touching the dancers. The crowd spins her along, but their swords are coming. Rowan knows they are. She has to find a way out, so she grabs for the swaying veil as she passes it. Instead of grasping the veil, a pale white palm presses against her own. The owner of the palm welcomes her to the court of the Ardent Queen. All at once, the dance comes to a halt, the sleepers dropping to their knees. Rowan's partner was a strange and terrible beauty, their face hollowed like a chalice and smoke rising from where their eyes should be. A cruel mouth smiles as they say they've been waiting for her. This strange figure announces themselves as the friend and counselor Rowan has been seeking. They make a gesture, and one of the sleeping knights produces Rowan's sword, offering up on their palms like Rowan had been freshly knighted. The figure squeezes her shoulder and tells Rowan she can take her sword back. Rowan grabs for it, not quite ready to raise it against the figure, but still demands that they let the sleepers go. If they could control the sleepers, they must be the one who cursed Eldraine. Their smile reveals 2 rows of razor-sharp teeth, and they explain that the one who cursed the plane is beyond the veil. Rowan doesn't wait for an invitation and runs for the gauzy veil, but the figure is already there to part it for her. On the other side, Rowan finds a feasting table, a beautiful woman in black at its head. The woman lifts her goblet to Rowan. In the other hand is a glass apple with strands of translucent violet sneaking out. The woman greets her, commenting that Rowan looks just like her mother. Whoever this woman was, she certainly has some nerve. Will and Rowan's mother had nothing to do with them. Their real mother was a cruel witch who had enslaved their father. Once the twins were born, she murdered them, meaning to drink their blood to extend the years of her mortal life. Their father, the late King Kenrtih, struck her down before she could complete the process, and the woman who would become their stepmother, Linden, restored the children's lives using a magical sword. The twins held no love for their biological mother. Rowan lifts her own sword to bring it down with a mighty swing, but the woman makes no move to stop her. She just sips from her goblet and says she brought Rowan here because she admired the fire within her. What? A knight was prepared to face all manner on the battlefield, but Rowan was never trained against such disarming sincerity. The woman eases the sword from its path, asking what she already knows. Rowan's comrades, her people, even her siblings were afraid of her. Isn't that right? She knows what it's like to have her family turn their backs on her, just like Rowan. She explains that she created the wicked slumber to keep her people safe against the Phyrexian invaders. That it spread to others was unfortunate. Even in this misfortune, she has found something beautiful. The woman asks Rowan if she wants to know. Rowan admits that she does, so the woman turns to the figure who sent Rowan through the veil. She calls them Ashiok, and they oblige. A blink, a moment of darkness, then Rowan opens her eyes. Standing at the woman's side are Rowan's parents, beaming with pride. She runs to embrace them, only for them to fade as she closes her arms. Rowan asks the woman if she was the one who sent her first vision, bidding her to come to Castle Ardenvale. The woman confirms that she did, but with the help of her mentor, this Ashiok figure. The vision told Rowan that she would find her blood here, and earlier, the woman said she looked a lot like her mother. Surely she didn't mean her stepmother Linden. The woman said her sister, Rowan's real mother, was the cruelest of all of them, a true witch. Rowan had magic in her blood, and she could use it for something good. How long had she denied that part of her? When she had cleaved the mountain in half, was that the witch's blood inside her? The woman, Rowan's aunt, she supposed, explains that every dreamer experiences the same thing. All these poor souls asleep, whatever they've lost is returned to them, and they feast in grand halls, celebrating victory with their loved ones. Wherever they wish to be, that is where they are, and where they will remain without worries or fear. Given the opportunity to spend eternity in a dream with her parents, could her cursed blood grant that to the entire realm? Though truly, people need more than dreams, don't they? Her aunt replies that some do, and they may stay awake, but others who seek escape find it in the wicked slumber. Their bodies serve at her will, but their minds are elsewhere, at peace. Rowan knew the slumber doesn't pick and choose who it takes. It wasn't going around asking people one by one. Her aunt assured her that she meant to keep the realm safe, and for that, she needed power to drive off threats. With power, she could command loyalty, endure any challenge, secure her own future. To seize power, you need courage and knowledge of your enemies. Rowan saw that. It was the reason no one respected her brother Will, and the same reason they feared her. People had respected her parents, who were fine warriors themselves, kind of heart, and earned their place. Will was kind of heart, but what had he accomplished? Before coming here, Rowan saw the slumber as a curse, but now, she sees what a blessing it could be. While her subjects slumbered, she could see to their well-being, protect the people who had lost so much. With an army of sleepers by her side, they could unite the realm and turn the curse of the twins' birth into something truly beautiful. Rowan can fix it. She can bring her people peace, if only her aunt can help her planeswalk again. The figure named Ashiok speaks up now, informing her that the spark is gone. Not only for her, but for many others. Rowan's aunt offers to teach her the rest of the lessons. Every ruler needs an heir after all. She introduces herself as Arit, and welcomes Rowan home, a place where she can finally be understood. There's a remote village on the edge of the realm, populated by more sheep than people, called Oranshire. Kellan slinks through the door of his family's Oranshire home as his mother looks up from her spinning. She rushes over to him, inspecting the scratches on his cheek and blood on his arms. In the folds of his hood, she finds an iron nail and asks questions, the kind of questions children wish their mothers wouldn't ask. Kellan doesn't want to talk about it, so his mother calls for his stepfather to get water from the well. She leads him to a chair at the table where it's easier to fuss over him. Kellan was wiry and small for 16, all the more reason for the other boys to target him. As his mother wiped the dried blood from his face, he remembered their taunts, calling him half-blood, saying he never belonged there. They were afraid of him. They blamed him for the slumber. Kellan's mother plucked more nails and splinters of hue from his hair and clothes as his stepfather Ronald came through the door sloshing water. The boys had asked if his real father was one of the Fae folk, some of the more mystical and enchanted peoples of Eldraine. To many, they were considered monsters. There was silence between them, then Ronald was the first to break it, reassuring Kellan that what matters is who he is and not where he comes from. Kellan was almost too frightened to ask, but he had to be brave. All the heroes in his stories were brave. He asked if he belonged in the woods, in the lands of the Fae. But his mother replies that the woods are dangerous, and if they went there, they would face them together when he was older. She embraces him, saying that he belongs here with them, no matter what anyone else says. As much as Kellan loves his family, when he looks to the woods, all he feels is longing. Every new moon, Kellan would walk with his mother to an old willow tree at the edge of the woods. They'd sit against its trunk, and his mother would tell him stories. Lately, instead of new heroes every time, she told him of two in particular, a woman who fled her training as a hedge witch, and the young man she saved from a troll. Through the wilds they journeyed together, facing all manner of beast and mage. Kellan has a feeling he knows who they are, but he enjoys getting to know them all the same. This night, he's running to the top of the hill, the family's sheepdog on his heels. The dog's name is Hex, and he barks, drool hanging from his jowls, as he bounds through the grass. At last, they reach the tree, both panting, and look over the village. Kellan searches for his mother, who promised to meet him there, but he can't see her. What he does see is an archway of translucent stone that he had never seen there before. His mother had prepared him for this. It was an invitation to speak with one of the high fairies. Kellan finally sees his mother running up the hill, apparently unaware of the archway. He could wait for her, ignore the archway, and let it fade away, but the voices of his tormentors rang in his ears, telling him again he doesn't belong here. Could it be Kellan's real father had finally taken notice of him? A hero never hesitates. He passes through the archway, leaving Hex behind to bark up a storm. A gust of wind shoves him through and dumps him on a cool, mossy floor. The grass is all silver. The twisting trees bear jeweled fruit. In the distance, there are giant thatch-roofed houses, while he's surrounded by tiny castles populated by miniature knights. Kellan sees a staircase, on top of which is a throne, with a figure sitting upon it. True beauty is enough to strike the viewer senseless. Same was for Kellan, for the figure sitting on the throne was as beautiful as the stars themselves. He can't comprehend what he's seen as the figure flashes a wicked smile. The figure asks Kellan, the brave hero, if he is pure of heart. The stories said it was best to avoid looking at the fae directly, so he stares at the ground and replies that he would like to be. The figure asked if Kellan was truly his father's son, seeing his wounds and knowing Kellan had not fought back. Kellan's heart skips a beat, and he asked the figure if he knew his real father, taking a step to get a better look. Roses lash his feet in place so he can't get any closer. The figure warns him his blood gives him some protection here, but if he takes a step forward, he would be forsaking his realm for this one. This was the Fairy Lord, Kellan realized, and tried to kneel the way knights do. The Fae Lord introduces themselves as Lord Talion, and informs him that their kind surrenders nothing. If Kellan would do them a service, Lord Talion would give him answers about his father. His mother had told him that the Fae do not lie. Talion hums a lovely song, snaps their fingers, and two more Fae appear, each bearing a bowl of fruit. Kellan was hungry, but his mother taught him well. The Fae do nothing for free. He refuses both bowls, and Talion waves them away with a smirk. The Fae Lord told him that witches 3 have this land with slumber plagued. Agatha the Hungry, in search of heroes to throw in her great cauldron. Cruel Hilda, who has taken Winter's crown. Wherever there are lovers and lords, you shall find the enchanting Yrite. Whoever is brave enough to defeat them shall break the wicked slumber and earn a boon from Talion's treasury. Talion was in need of a real hero, and the bravest thing Kellan had ever done was walk through that archway. He had never fought a battle or completed a quest, but how could he say no? Maybe his father was a strapping fairy knight, or perhaps a cunning mage. Whoever he was someone Talion respected, and that had to mean something. Kellan's mother glimpsed this land of silver grass once and decided to leave it, but Kellan wants to know more. He could fail, but if he succeeds, he would finally know the truth. Kellan agreed to Talion's quest. Kellan asks a stranger if he had seen any witches lately. The man laughs and tells him about one down the street who sells the best pies in Edgewall. The stranger is kind enough to toss a coin to the boy, and Kellan tucks it away in his pouch. All he has to do was keep at it. This is only the first step in the journey, right? All his life, Kellan's mother told him stories of places like Edgewall, dwarves, fauns, mages, but now, here, they were real. There were shops and vendors everywhere, and when Kellan found the pie shop, he saw a line that doubled or maybe even tripled up in length. They must really make great pies here. But there's no way the lady was an actual witch. His mother always told him cooking was as close as one could get to witchcraft, so maybe the shop owner would know something. Kellan stands at the end of the line to wait. Looking around, he sees a sleeping man under the eaves of the shop with a swirl of violet around him. His eyes are closed, mouth open, drool falling on his armor. This must be that slumber he had heard about, the curse he now was looking to end. A hurried customer bumps into the sleeper, and the sleeper jerks and falls over. Why is no one helping him? Kellan makes a move to aid the fallen knight, but a hand grabs his wrist. A girl in a red cloak warns him not to touch the sleeper. She tells Kellan that the wicked slumber spreads, but no one knows how, so it was best to not touch the cursed. She had heard a boy who was asking about witches and recognized Kellan was that boy. She warned him that if the wicked slumber didn't get him, the witches would, if he kept asking questions like that. Kellan told her about his quest, and though he didn't have a sword, he did have Lord Talion's parting gift, a pair of basket hilts made of old glowing wood. Never mind that there was nothing attached to the hilts. They meant he was a real hero. Surely anyone would be impressed by them. The girl only raises a brow, but she tells Kellan about her brother Peter, who lives in Dunborough and knows all about witches. But he had been away for several days. Kellan had not met any Peters during his travels, but the girl insisted that he should seek him out and tell him that Ruby is waiting for him at home. Ruby tries to bid Kellan farewell, but he insists that she can tell him herself if he comes along on the quest. She knew the way to Dunborough, where witches were said to be, and maybe Lord Talion could help her find her brother. Kellan didn't want to reveal who his liege was, but he was sure the Lord of the Fae could help. He was nervous to announce that he was working for the Fae. He knew many people feared them, and probably wouldn't offer aid if they knew he was their champion. Without revealing that fact, Ruby agrees. She saw this young boy and felt sorry for him. He seemed a bit pathetic. Someone had to look after Kellan. It might as well be her. Over the heaths and through the barrow in search of witches they go. Sharp Phyrexian remnants litter the countryside, hacked apart after the slumber stopped them in their tracks. Ruby was surprised that Kellan had never seen a Phyrexian before. He stopped to gawk at one that looked like a battering ram, weeping oil, and he turns away to look at the twisted trees rather than this twisted thing that had once been alive. The Boy King said the Phyrexians came from somewhere else, some other realm. Kellan wasn't aware that there were any other realms. He couldn't imagine much more than what he'd seen in Edgewall, or the floating pixies scattered across the wilds. The unseen pixies play tricks as they move branches from their path, splashing water onto Ruby's shoes. She picks an apple out of her basket and throws it as fast as a crossbow bolt, and somewhere amongst the trees a pixie yelps. What a shot! Kellan wasn't so sure he could do as much with his wooden hilts, but it makes little difference. In that moment, an arrow whistles past his face, nicking the tip of his nose. Ruby is the first to act, and act quickly, tackling Kellan into a blackberry bush as his clothes protect him from the thorns. Beyond the thicket, they see him, a man in wolf armor, the snarling maw concealing all but his burning eyes. He was staring right at them, striding for them. They had to run. The wolf knight howls and peels through the forest, scattering crows and pixies alike. Another arrow whistles over Kellan's shoulder, and he knows he needs his wooden hilts. They weren't swords, but Talion had promised him they would help refine his abilities. So far, they had only helped him punch harder when he held them, but that was better than nothing. Kellan throws one of his hilts at the pursuing wolf knight, and it bounces uselessly off his armor. Then, it flies back into Kellan's hand. They ran beneath the massive body of a Phyrexian they had passed earlier, but now found other creatures. They looked like a toddler's drawing of a wolf, though they were muscular and their fangs dripped with blood. They were witch stalkers, and before Kellan can remember if they are magical or not, Ruby weaves between them, smiling beneath her hood. Kellan gathers his courage, throws up his own hood, and darts through the pack, wailing like a child. Ruby pulls Kellan up as he basks in the glory of his first adventure, having escaped the snaps of the witch stalkers. The wolf knight steps into the clearing, letting out another howl. The witch stalkers answer, causing the wolf knight to turn and run. Kellan stood up relieved to see the witch stalkers giving chase and notices a cabin they must have missed earlier. The house was thorny and black, like it was made from blackberry brambles, and violet windows pulsed from within. All around the house was a thick violet mist. This had to be a witch's house. The two of them slink up the large windows to peer inside to see two people. The one Kellan thinks must be the witch walks in a circle around a large darkness in the center of the room. Smoke rises from whatever she's guarding. The other figure is slumped over, facing away from the window. The darkness was in fact a real cauldron, and Ruby says the woman is using it to boil people's bones into stew. The two duck beneath the windowsill to avoid her violet, glowing gaze as the witch paces around the cauldron. They sneak around the corner, careful not to touch the cursed plumes of violet smoke that hang around them. Kellan presses his ear to the door, and he can hear the witch's voice muttering something about a knight walking in when she was hungry, and the armor being difficult to eat without breaking a tooth. A haunting rhyme for a haunting proposal. She was going to eat the knight? They had to do something, quickly. Then, the wolf knight slides through the mists, covered in blood. Maybe he could fight the witch inside, and Ruby could hold off the wolf knight outside. And then, maybe when the witch was gone, the wolf knight would disappear too. That's what happened to conjured guardians in the stories his mother told. Kellan hoped that if his father, his real father, was listening, he would give him courage. Kellan opens the door to the house and scurries to the cauldron quiet and quick, the witch continuing her awful song. Lashed to a log is a woman wearing armor, her right arm missing, and in its place, solid enchanted wood. The witch is so preoccupied with finding the right spices for her foul-smelling brew that she doesn't notice Kellan. He lowers his head and charges, like one of the rams on his farm back home. The witch screams as he knocks her into the cauldron and a puff of black smoke rises. There would be time to think about the implications of what he had just done later. Now, he needed to save the knight. Kellan unties her and grabs her hammer that leans against the shelves holding jars labeled things like Eye of Newt and Toe of Frog. Ruby runs through the door as the knight tries to lift her hammer, but collapses. Here, Kellan learns an important lesson. Not all knights can be heroes all the time. The wolf knight walks into the threshold, and Ruby throws jars of ingredients from the shelves at him. As the bottles smash against his armor, he cries out her name, happy to have finally found her. He removes his helm, revealing a grizzled woodsman. It's Ruby's brother, Peter. He had heard an awful song while he was hunting and was enchanted by the witch. Since Kellan helped his sister, Peter promised to grant him a wish so long as it was in his power to do so. Kellan asked for him to help get the cauldron to Lord Talion, to show them that the witch had been defeated. Peter promised the knight with the wooden arm that he would come back and make a healing potion as a consolation for injuring her while under the witch's spell. Kellan tries not to think of what is sloshing around inside as he, Ruby, and Peter push the cauldron outside of the cabin. Instead of being met by enchanted violet mists, Talion's court appears to greet them. Kellan's kindly lord doesn't make themselves visible. He only knows Talion is there by faint music that plays around them. Their advice was quick and to the point. Hilda is the next witch Kellan should seek. Hilda has concealed herself from Talion's eyes, but Kellan was to consult the mirror Indralan to find her. The mirror was torn from Castle Vantris by Gera Grandsquall, and now lies far from its home. Talion tells him of a beanstalk that grows not a half-day's ride from here. He was to climb it and find the mirror at its peak. The court then disappears, leaving the three of them standing before the cabin. Ruby realizes Kellan's liege is the Fae King, something he was trying to hide. He feared that she would refuse to help him if she knew. Instead of refusing, Ruby admitted that Kellan was braver than she had ever thought, and agreed to go with him on this quest for the Fae King, though her brother Peter was far too injured to join them. Someone else thought he was brave? That was something Kellan could live with. Together, they went to tend to the knight's wounds and rest before setting out on their next adventure. Troyan the guide calls down to Ruby and Kellan, advising them not to look down. At first, he claimed to be an expert climber, but now admits that he had never climbed a beanstalk, not even once. Troyan certainly looked like a beanstalk climber, blue-skinned and dashing, clad in blue and green, some strange mythical creature with too many arms painted on his coat. He even carried a sign that read, "Professional Wanderer and Adventurer." That had been the whole reason Kellan and Ruby hired him. Troyan feels a very minuscule pang of guilt and sits down on a giant leaf to search inside his pack. He pulls out 2 glass vials of oily, slick liquid, the stopper covered in bulbous warts. Troyan had been saving these for a rough time, and though they were hard to come by, he could spare them for the price Kellan and Ruby were paying. 15 minutes of muscle-burning effort, and Kellan reaches the leaf Troyan is sitting on. Sometimes being a hero isn't all it's cracked up to be. Troyan tosses a vial to Kellan with the stopper unplugged. A drop landed on his nose. It smells like swamp water, but Kellan's throat buzzes, and he can't stop himself from drinking it in an instant. His tongue tingles and stretches, rolling out of his mouth like an unfurled banner. His skin is oozing and slick, and he feels a pent-up energy in his legs. Kellan opens his mouth, but all that comes out is a croak. Troyan assures him that it's only temporary, but now they could jump all the way up the beanstalk this way. When Ruby reaches the leaf, she looks skeptical, wondering if a witch had made this frogification potion, questioning if Troyan was one of the Fae. Ruby decides she's going to ride on Kellan's back instead of drinking the potion herself. If they were so hard to come by, they should probably save it for later. Kellan, farm boy from Oranshire, leaps into the sky. Swamp water bubbles on his feet, propelling them higher and higher. A moonlit castle awaits, Stromkeld, the home of giants. It's hard for Kellan to keep his mouth from hanging open, awestruck by its size. Giants are big, but until now he never knew how big. They could probably walk right beneath the front doors. Human visitors would be like mice to them. They had come at night, hoping to sneak in while everyone was asleep, but it takes them an hour's walk to clear the courtyard. The ground begins to quake, and Troyan explains that it's the giants dancing, which means they were, unfortunately, awake. If they're dancing, maybe they could still sneak in unnoticed. They walk through the gate, passing beneath a wooden ceiling and marble arches higher than any parapet. Boisterous music thums as the giants come into view, holding goblets like wells of wine. When the quake of their dancing feet come, Kellan hops along with them. He wonders if his father has wings, and if he'll have them when he's older. Not all giants are great dancers, so it's hard to predict where their next step would fall. More than once, Ruby pulls Kellan out of Doom's reach, as they make their way across the dance floor. This was dangerous, but with music playing and laughter all around, it was fun too. They finally make it to a stair, but only Troyan is able to scale the slippery stone. He drops a rope for Kellan and Ruby, so they can haul themselves up, not even sure if they'll find the mirror that they're looking for up here. Halfway up, they have the displeasure of running into a goose. Years on the farm had hardened Kellan against these blasted creatures. The only thing to rival geese were the local bullies. Kellan thought geese might actually be worse. This goose was the size of his family's market cart, with a garland of gold around its neck, waddling down the steps ahead of its owner. The owner must be the lady of the house, who doesn't notice them until her goose honks a warning. Kellan knew in his heart there was only one way to deal with this abomination: to run for their lives. Kellan and Ruby launch themselves down the stairs toward Troyan, avoiding the goose's snapping beak. Then, two fingers pinch the back of Kellan's cloak, lifting him high into the air. Kellan apologizes to the giant for intruding while the goose nips at his dangling feet. The giant demands to know who he is and why he's at her birthday party. Kellan attempts to strike a heroic pose against the force of her speech, explaining that he is on a quest. When he says he's come seeking a magic mirror, she cuts him off. Ruby shouts up through cupped hands that they mean no harm. They only want to ask the mirror a question. The giant declares that all small folk tell lies, and even birthday wishes cannot sway her opinion. They hear a deep sigh, then a voice calling for their unwilling host, apparently named Belluna. Belluna turns to see a man half her size, dressed in finery with a bushy green beard. She curtsies to her lord, Yorvo, almost dropping Kellan into the goose's waiting beak. As Yorvo stepped closer, Kellan was sure that he must be made of plants. Was this the Giant King? He was smaller than Belluna, but then again she seemed to respect him. Kellan didn't know the Giant King's name, only that he had disappeared during the Phyrexian invasion. Yorvo asks Kellan why he's here, and Kellan answers that he's on a quest from the Fae Lord, hoping the mention of Talion would smooth things over. He explains that they seek to defeat two witches and need to ask the mirror where to go. The Giant King nods, stroking his beard, and invites them to be his guests. He tells Belluna that there's no harm in showing them the mirror. The three of them were far too small to move it themselves. The king passes, giving them a wink and patting the goose on its head as he goes. Belluna groans, but gathers Ruby and Troyan into her hand with Kellan. Her gait is wide as they reach a bedroom in mere moments. She sits them down in front of the mirror, and when Kellan peers into it, he sees someone that was larger than the boy he had been just a few weeks ago. Though he was a little leaner from travel, he looked more heroic. He speaks up, asking the mirror where they can find the witch Hilda, but there's no answer. Belluna says that he must tell the mirror something it doesn't know. Troyan clears his throat and steps up to introduce himself to the mirror, revealing that he was not born on Eldraine. Winter's own breath fogs the surface. Beneath the condensation, there's a castle of ice atop a rocky cliff. Ruby knew the place, Loch Larent. Her brother used to take her fishing there, though there wasn't any ice before the war. How had they built a castle that big so fast? Kellan didn't know, but if she led the way, maybe they would find out. The day was brisk and bright when Kellan and Ruby returned to the town of Edgewall, though they found it had changed. Where there had been threads of violet mist when they last were here, now glowing rivers and brooks flow down the streets and alleys. There had been dozens of sleepers, but now the victims are beyond counting. Ruby doesn't say so, she's too brave, but Kellan knows she's taken aback as they pass dreamers leaning against balconies, hidden beneath parchment and blankets, or just standing at open windows. Kellan watches her avoiding the strands of violet, as she advises him to do the same. She can't have the hero of this story falling asleep on her. He wishes she hadn't called him that. Ruby was at least as brave as he was. Kellan thought she was a hero too. Ruby explains that her brother Peter was the hero of her family. He had raised her all on his own, and was the best hunter in town. That was a real hero to her. Kellan thought there were plenty of ways to be a hero. Peter was one, and so was Ruby. Kellan too would like to be a hero someday, and he just might be, as he's well on his way to completing his first quest. Ruby leads Kellan to a small cabin on the edge of town whose chimney emitted a plume of applewood smoke. Kellan's stomach rumbles, and he's distracted by Ruby asking what makes a hero. He knows a hero always does the right thing. They make other people's lives better. Kellan waits for Ruby's answer, but before she can speak, her brother Peter is ushering them inside. The cabin is filled with the smell of venison steaks, and the conversation quickly turns from heroes to food and plans. Peter agrees to take them to Loch Lariant, the location of the next witch, Hilda, but on one condition. They must wear their thickest coats, and when they can no longer feel their noses, they must turn back no matter the circumstance. If they hadn't finished by then, Peter promised to go himself, as soon as his wounds had healed. He'd heard about the castle, that no hunters or bandits had managed to get inside. Even Sir Imodain tried it and couldn't even make it across the drawbridge, even with the fire magic she used to warm her. Kellan would not turn back. Not when so many people were sick. He had to end this curse. Peter pointed out that it didn't have to be him who ended this curse. A hero must know when a monster can be felled and when one cannot. What if he was right? Peter gives Ruby a bearskin to wear over her red cloak, and a wool coat to Kellan. Kellan groans, realizing the wool is from his hometown of Oranshire, but at least he knows it'll keep him warm. Before they leave on their quest, Peter takes them to the town square to see a puppet show. There are dozens of children gathered there, wearing red hoods and woolen cloaks, mimicking the puppet characters who are defeating the evil man-eating witch. Kellan thinks he sees Ruby tear up in the flickering candlelight, but he doesn't say a word. Led by Peter, they made the week-long journey from Edgewall towards Loch Lariant. As they approach the loch itself, Peter wants to stop and make camp, and who can blame him? Kellan had scarcely experienced colder days than this, and even on those days, his family had at least sheep to huddle up to keep warm. Peter again asked to make sure they didn't want him to come, but his sister Ruby insisted he still needed to recover from his wounds. When they bid him farewell, he holds them close and wishes them good fortune. Every once in a while, Ruby glances back, searching for the orange silhouette of Peter's fire, though all around them, the sky was marbled with blue, green, and violet. Beneath the loch's frozen surface, there were eerie lights bobbing and weaving, and Kellan thinks he spots a pair of yellow eyes, but they disappear a moment later. The castle's main tower stands on a cliff overlooking the loch, but there was much more to it than Kellan realized from afar. There's a never-ending series of baileys, each leading to a new gate, which open to sparkling new fortresses. There are several drawbridges to nowhere, and Kellan counts at least 5 portcullises. The road before them is paved with glittering crystal gravel, and it feels strange under Ruby and Kellan's feet. At least they didn't have to do any climbing this time. Besides, fear was nothing in the face of the greater good. They would miss their climbing expert though, Troyan and his outlandish stories. Ruby was smart enough to know that they were made up, but Kellan thought they were enchanting stories of the fae, not realizing that they were in fact true stories from his home plane of Ravnica. Ruby squeezes his hand, understanding how badly Kellan wanted to see more of the Faelands. She assures him he will be the toast of the town once he completes this quest. Kellan isn't so sure about that. He had always been too fae for humans. What if he was too human for the fae? Talion had pointed out how little he knew of fae customs, and he still hasn't gotten these dang basket hilts to work. Before he can think of a response, there's a woman's voice carried on the wind. It told them to turn back. Knights, bandits, and would-be kings had fallen on this path. 2 children had little hope of success. The sky darkens overhead and the wind picks up, causing them to pull their hoods up against the cold. They weren't giving up that easily. The voice warns that the brave live short lives, and that they would protect their icy realm from all threats. No matter the age of that threat, they would find no mercy here. With every word the witch Hilda speaks, the air grows colder and the wind stronger. Kellan only knows Ruby is near because of her red cloak. Surely, she could no longer feel her nose like he couldn't. He shouts over the wind, telling her that she could go back. Ruby refuses. She wasn't going to let that witch win. Hilda gives them one final warning, promising they would die if they didn't turn back. The veil of snow is so dense that Kellan can hardly see the castle, no more than a mile away. He could turn away, but if he does, no one would ever wake up, and he would never know who his true father was. This witch clearly didn't know a questing hero when she saw one. Hilda claims that heroes die like anyone else, before her voice fades into the wind, summoning creatures from within it. They hear a sound like breaking glass and see a streak of cerulean. An icy spear lands at their feet, and they realize the snow had solidified into mail and plate. A warrior of frost, twice Kellan's height, stands over them as a new spear forms in his hand. He thrusts the spear at Kellan's heart, but Ruby pulls him away. The spear tip catches on the Orangeshire wool too strong to rip. Kellan's fingers are too stiff to unclasp the cloak, and even if he left it behind, how long would he survive without it in this freezing cold? Kellan sees an axe form in the hand of the frozen warrior, and he shouts for Ruby to go on ahead. Before she can answer, another warrior forms and yanks her into the air, his frosty sword against her throat. No, this isn't how it's supposed to go. In the stories, the heroes always figure something out. Kellan didn't have any magical weapons, his mother never taught him how to wield any, and his father was never around to teach him anything. Kellan whimpers and reaches for his basket hilts, begging his father, his fae father, for help. Gold light suddenly cuts through the snow, bright as spring, glowing from the hilts. The wood changes, and on instinct, Kellan lashes at the warriors, as his newfound sword cuts straight through the icy arm. Kellan, in his desperation, conjured a delicate blade of light from his basket hilt. Ruby's eyes are wide as she drops to the ground, cheering for Kellan. He was really doing it. He was using fae powers. The warriors wander away, howling with pain, leaving their weapons in the snow. Ruby picks up a sword and stands back to back with Kellan. It seems to have gotten colder. His new sword now felt heavy in his hands. A strange sleepiness creeps in, and Kellan worries that he must be cursed. But then again, there were no plumes of violet here. His eyes begin to droop as he thinks how well he's done. Maybe he deserves a nap. Now it's Kellan's turn to fall, but Ruby is there to catch him. Ruby carries Kellan through the snow. He looks fragile enough for a snowflake to break him. Her brother would have told her to go home. They had failed. Maybe some other hero would come, with a heart like a furnace and blood like molten ore. A month ago, she thought life was about staying alive, looking out for you and yours. This was bigger than the two of them. The puppet show in Edgewall showed her that. All those children who wore red hoods, what would they think if she left Kellan here alone? What would Kellan say when he awoke, never having the opportunity to learn about his true father? Could she live with herself if the wicked slumber never faded away? Ruby's footsteps never felt so heavy as Hilda's voice speaks to her, pointing out that she owes Kellan nothing. Ruby knew that people didn't need to owe each other to help each other out. When she retorts, the voice grows quiet, and Ruby walks in the silent frost, each step a battle won. Hilda's voice comes back again, trying to convince her to leave Kellan behind. Then she may make it to the castle. Ruby breathes in what feels like glass. Then a strong gust sweeps her off her feet. She tumbles with Kellan, cold sapping her strength. Yet she stands, lifting her friend from the snow, determined not to leave him behind. As she trudges one foot in front of the other, she thinks Hilda must be lonely. That must be why she keeps taunting. The witch must not have anyone else to talk to. There's another strong gust, and Ruby holds Kellan tighter as she hunkers down against battering hail. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the skeletal gates rise above her. She stands, looking at the drawbridge, the part Peter said was the most challenging. Ruby sees lumps hidden beneath the snow, bodies of hunters and bandits alike. She had promised to turn back when she couldn't feel her nose, and in truth, she hadn't been able to feel it for hours. Ruby steps onto the bridge, exposed to weather from all sides. She kept walking, though Hilda's voice told her she was a fool to continue. Maybe Ruby would die here, but she had to at least try. Hilda can't understand why Ruby would risk her life, her voice sounding upset for the first time. Ruby couldn't give up, because her friend wanted to defeat the witches and learn more about his father. She couldn't let him down. She would risk her life, because it was the right thing to do. Ruby's knees give. She can't walk anymore, but she can still crawl. Tired and clumsy, she lifts Kellan onto her back and plunges through the snow on her hands and knees. Deep down, Ruby knows this won't work, but she's trying anyway. Kellan would do the same for her. Even if she passes out, even if the snow takes her, maybe Kellan's fae blood would help him survive somehow. Maybe he would make it to the castle and get answers to his questions. Ruby reaches out, surprised to find an outstretched hand, a crystal bracelet around the wrist. It's the witch, Hilda, promising that she means no harm. Hilda promises to prove it as she kneels down next to Ruby. Ruby is surprised to see how sad she looks. No snow-white finery or icy crown could conceal her loneliness. Suddenly, the weather around them clears to a gentle snowfall. Hilda leans over the children and kisses their foreheads, welcoming them to winter's home. Magic tingles over Ruby's skin and her eyes begin to lose focus. The witch promises to keep them safe. Ruby was right about her, she was lonely. She'd even forgotten how lonely she was until Ruby showed her what she had forsaken all this time. As Ruby's vision starts to fade, Hilda bids her to sleep, and that they would have the truth when they wake. Kellan and Ruby wake hours later in a room of glistening ice. Two cold golems guard their slumber, and before them is a morning banquet presented on a crystal tray. Kellan reaches out from under the piles of blankets, going for the hearty soup, but Ruby stays his hand. The witch suddenly rises from a chair across the room, claiming again that she means no harm. Ruby wasn't sure if this was a trick. Maybe the witch was going to eat them after all. Hilda supposes they must have met her sister, Agatha, who really did eat people. Kellan told her that they shoved Agatha into her own cauldron. Hilda, however, doesn't seem bothered. She says her sister deserved no less. She used to think she was different from her sisters. They sought power and she only ever wanted to be alone. The witch bore them no ill will, but Ruby was hard to convince. She offers 2 more gifts to prove her intentions. The first gift was saving their lives. Hilda lifts the frozen crown from her head, giving it to Kellan. He was to hand it over to the kindly lord as proof of her defeat. Ruby argues that she's not defeated if she's still standing, building a giant castle and freezing people to death. Hilda bid them to look outside. Streams of water were already cascading down the walls of ice. Without the crown on her head, the castle began to melt. Kellan sets the crown on his lap, thinking how brave Hilda must be to set that kind of power aside. The last gift was information. She told them that the witches did not create the wicked slumber alone, it was beyond their power. When the Phyrexian invaders arrived on Eldraine, they each had their own ideas about how to handle them. Talion was the one who decided Yrith's sleeping curse was the surest way, but the 3 witches were not powerful enough to cast the spell. There were 4 of them once, but one died 20 years ago, so Talion offered to help, along with a boon the Fae were famous for offering. From the stories gifted to Rowan by Yrith, it was clear this 4th sister, this 4th witch, was none other than Will and Rowan's biological mother. The wicked slumber was only meant to stop the invaders. That it spiraled out of control was Yrith's doing. She leapt at the chance to have all those people at her beck and call. She probably would have done it even without the boon the kindly lord offered. But Kellan was supposed to be on a heroic quest. He thought he was doing the right thing, but it was Talion, his lord, who caused this? Hilda assures him that he is doing what is right, only that he's cleaning up the mess the 4 of them made. Kellan trembles, thinking about how the Fae aren't supposed to lie. Kellan picks up the crown and storms out of the room, down the spiral stairs, blood rushing through his ears. When he arrives outside, he sees a Fae portal and reaches for the door. Ruby grabs his wrists and reminds him that they were going to do this together. Kellan nods, and they walk through the portal. In the land of the Fae, the 2 heroes stride, walking amongst the land of false castles and false hopes. Talion awaits, draped on their throne like always. Kellan throws the crown at Talion's feet, accusing them of lying. The kindly lord says his father's spirit is finally shining through, and sits up in their seat to explain. The Fae do not lie. If they did, their blood would clot like spoiled milk. Ruby told Talion that they knew about the curse. They knew that they had been used. The kindly lord asks if it's such a bad thing to be used for a noble cause. It wasn't the same to Kellan. The Fae Lord asked if he was pure of heart, and promised to give him information about his father. It was shameful to break down and cry like this, yet Kellan couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Foolishly, he believed Talion. He believed he really knew his father. Talion argued that they did know Kellan's father, and they would still tell him once they finished this quest. Or would Kellan really not save the realm because he didn't like the reason it was being saved? Kellan needed to find Arit at Castle Ardenvale and defeat her to end the curse. Or he could return to his pastoral home and never again feel the belonging that the Fae world offered him. Talion waves a wand and the world flickers around them. Once more, they stand on the cliffs outside Hilda's castle, and Kellan begins to weep. Kellan and Ruby approach Castle Ardenvale atop their new ponies, gifts for their most recent heroic deeds. After learning the truth about his lord Talion's part in casting the wicked slumber, Kellan didn't feel much like a hero. He looks over to Ruby, who's cloaked in her namesake color, its length concealing a blade of eternal ice. With the last of the crown's power, Hilda granted Ruby's wish to have a sword as big as she was. An eerie quiet rolls across the plain, for no foe had hindered their path to the castle. The front doors were torn from their hinges. The corrupted heart of the curse had rotted and consumed the wood. The dreamers that lurk beyond the doors were the nightmares that plagued Kellan on their journey. This was not a place of comfort and rest, nor a place for glory. It is a place where wounds fester. Kellan didn't want to enter, but something in his blood made him stick to his oath. Ruby protested that they would just be hurting the sleeping guards if they fought their way through them. So they tie their horses to a post, leaving them with bags of feed, and stand at the base of the castle wall. Kellan produces the remaining frogification potion that their beanstalk guide Troyan had given them, but this time it's Ruby's turn to be a frog. Kellan climbs onto her back and they both jump up and over the castle walls. Kellan looks around as Ruby begins to change back into her human form. There are no sleepers standing guard here. They aren't sure where to find the witch Arit, so they open the first door they see. They peer into a yawning hallway lined with faded and defaced portraits. The only light comes from the violet mists hanging just above the stone floor. Together, the two heroes follow the winding cords of mists through the halls of Castle Ardenvale. They pass rooms that are empty and ransacked. The only sounds are the echoing squeaks of mice. It's no wonder they hear footsteps scraping against the stone before they ever see who's coming. Kellan and Ruby press themselves on either side of the door, and Ruby peeks around the corner. She looks stunned and gestures for Kellan to do the same. Standing before a lectern, surrounded by swirls of violet clouds, is Rowan Kenrtih. Kellan couldn't believe their luck. She must have figured out how to end this curse as well. He dashes into the room with Ruby close behind, calling out to Rowan. Instead of a warm welcome, Rowan demands to know who they are and why they're here. Kellan explains that they came to defeat the witch, just like she did, they supposed. He wondered why she was frowning. Maybe the curse was keeping her in this place. Rowan Kenrtih neither laughs nor smiles. She lays her hands on either edge of the lectern as sparks crackle along her fingers. Her voice was cool and level as she told them to leave. The late High King's daughter probably could handle this herself, but Kellan promised that he would help end the curse. Rowan tells them that it's best if they're not here. Something in her voice is disconcerting, and Kellan takes a closer look at the book before her. In jagged handwriting, he can read, Attempt 23. Haven't been able to put anyone to sleep yet except for the old-fashioned way. He has no time to process what he's read, for Rowan is wreathed in crackling sparks. Suddenly, Kellan's vision goes white. As Kellan wakes, he hears the faint noise of Ruby's voice, sounding alarmed. A shower of cold water pours over him and his eyes clear to see her holding an empty bucket. He moves to wipe the water from his face and realizes he had been bound with rope, but that rope had already been cut. Kellan sees Ruby holding her frosty sword and wonders how she got it back. Sir Rowan had knocked them both out and was trying some weird dream magic on them, but she was interrupted with the arrival of a cavalry. Ruby woke to find them guarded by two sleepers, who now lay motionless on the floor. Kellan can't believe Rowan turned on them, but Ruby heard her say that she was trying to help them. A very peculiar stance to take, given she just shocked them with lightning. In her heart of hearts, Rowan knew this dream couldn't last. just as no amount of training prepared her to save her family from New Phyrexia. No amount of wishful thinking could extend this respite into lasting peace. Her time studying the magic that would save Eldraine had always been fated to end, but she hoped she'd have longer than just a few weeks. Her brother Will, who styled himself as High King of Eldraine, sent knights who were now bursting through her front gates. Arit was seated upon her throne, violet strands flying from her wrists to the sleeping warrior's limbs. While Rowan struggled to weave a dream for just the 2 children she captured, Arit was able to control an entire army. Ashiok had left the realm to attend to business elsewhere. Rowan was all Arit had to help her. A woman in her brother's vanguard orders them to stand down as Arit positions 2 ranks of sleepers at the foot of her throne. The vanguard's arm is wooden, wielding a hammer and fire magic. Rowan recognizes this is Imodain. Of course, someone as careless as Imodain is shooting fire at innocent sleepers. Rowan focuses on the sparks in her blood, letting them build, until she unleashes a bolt aimed for the knight's feet. Stone shatters as Rowan declares there's no High King of Eldraine anymore. Imodain looks shocked to see her, as Rowan steps up onto the dais to protect this witch, Arit. As she rises, Rowan spots her brother, and comes to realize that all this will end today, one way or another. Behind the vanguard, he sits atop his white horse, sword drawn. Rime coats his armor, and despite riding into battle, he hasn't the sense to don a helmet. Seeing her brother was like seeing all of the parts of herself that she didn't like, externalized into someone else. He calls out to Rowan, his voice full of ache and disbelief. There's a lump in her throat when her brother looks at her like this, with fear, like he wants her to be something other than what she is. She calls back, saying that she's learning how to save the realm. He thinks this isn't like her, working with witches to curse the realm? When will he realize that the Rowan he knew is dead? Will begs her to come home. Is this what he thinks the High King should be? A man on the verge of tears atop a warhorse? At best, it was contradictory, but it certainly wasn't strength. Rowan wants so badly for her brother to understand that she's never going to be all right again, but she knows he never will. Then, her sword is beating back shields and snaps of lances, parrying and dodging. When she reaches her brother, she levels her sword and dares him to dismount. His cool eyes study her. Then, he steps from his warhorse, drawing no weapon. Will tells her that their siblings, Hazel and Eric, need them. They still have a home. Their parents were dead, the realm shattered, and her brother was acting like talking about it would help. He never was one for action. Rowan moves to slash him across the chest, a move he must deflect. But Rowan is stronger. She's always been stronger. Under a relentless barrage of blows, Will steps backward. His knights part to let the twins battle. If it was because they feared her or because her brother ordered them not to touch her, Rowan didn't know. Will shoots a bolt of ice at her feet, finally stopping her in place. The battle rages around them. Knights against dreamers, friends against friends. Her brother fights back tears, admitting he's sorry he didn't help her when she needed it. Rowan cannot look at her brother this way for long, so she checks her Arit over her shoulder. Her heart sinks as she sees the children have gotten free and are attacking the witch. The boy, Kellan, slashes with golden whips, and the girl is swinging a sword twice her size. Arit may be powerful at spellcraft, but she was no fighter, unable to deal with the children and control the sleepers at the same time. Will can't believe she wants to save this witch, that she's happy to fight against him to do so. Rowan explains that this is their aunt, that magic had always been in their blood. They could use it to keep Eldraine safe. No one has to suffer anymore. No one has to die. Will tells Rowan that he doesn't know her anymore. His words unleash another wave of anger. Rowan blasts the vanguard again, over and over. She lets loose her frustration and hurt at her faithless former friends. She would show them all her power. All of them knew she was hurting, but left her to rot. Rowan lets out a breath as the dust of her rage settles, expecting to see everyone lay low. Instead, she sees a cocoon of ice, pitted, cracked, and scarred. Will dismisses it with a wave of his hand, still trying to convince her that her solution won't work. Rowan charges her brother, relying on her sword where her magic failed her. As she slashes, a familiar hardwood catches her blade, and Imodain shoves her back. Rowan feels iced against the nape of her neck, and smoke begins to fill up her lungs. veils of black coalesce into Ashiok's elegant form, now standing amidst the battle. Rowan smirks, knowing that it's second nature for Ashiok to control the Dreamers. Now they attack with a new grace, swaying away from incoming blows, dealing their own with vicious precision. Imodaine sends a devastating blow that Rowan doesn't bother to dodge. There's something she understands that the others don't know. They can't win against Ashiok. Rowan just had to hold out long enough for Arit to put them all to sleep. Rowan drives the pommel of her sword into Imodaine's face and sends sparks through her armor. Imodaine howls, trying to tear the heated plate from her body, while a dozen more knights surround Rowan. 13-1. She likes those odds. 4 of Will's guards collapse around him, all from blows dealt by Rowan, as they now join the ranks of the sleepers. In the distance, Rowan spots a flash of gold among Ashiok's smoke. It's the boy from earlier, swinging some enchanted chain, weaving between the combating knights. She turns back to Will. The boy was merely one child against Ashiok. What could he possibly do? Rowan criticizes her brother's diplomacy. If he'd talked to the Phyrexians, does he think their parent would be any more alive? For years they've sparred. For years they knew each other's tricks. Will can conjure ice shields to deflect her every move. As he ices the ground at Rowan's feet, she tells him if he would look around, he would see his army has fallen asleep. Will, like the follower he is, does as he's told. Rowan watches as he looks around him, as he conjures a final icy bolt that she easily avoids. He smiles. It's the oldest trick in the book, but as typical, she's fallen for it. Rowan looks behind her to see Ashiok, now with an ice bolt through their chest. Rowan realizes that the boy wasn't trying to defeat Ashiok, but merely hold them in place for Will to land a strike. Ashiok lets out a howl of pain as ice spreads through their body. Smoke swallows them, and in an instant, they're gone. Rowan realizes Ashiok still had their spark. They were still a planeswalker. She was too stunned to react to the girl in the red cloak, now pressing her sword to Arit's throat. Arit looks calm and collected as her eyes meet Rowan's over the ruins of the throne room. A single thread of the curse, hardly noticeable, links them. The witch tells Rowan to leave. When the time is right, they would meet again. Arit assures her that they wouldn't kill her. They were too soft. So, they would bide their time. The thread of the curse snaps, and Rowan is once again alone in the recesses of her mind. If she didn't heed Arit's advice, surely her brother would imprison her. There would be an endless parade of tender-hearted fools coming to heal her, to speak with her, to try and understand her. Meanwhile, Eldraine will still be splintered. If she pretended to be alright, Will would still be High King, and Rowan would always be the woman he graciously forgave. The rebel. No, there was no going back now. Rowan Kenrtih takes a breath, letting power crackle through her. It's difficult to control when there's this much of it, but as the energy leaves her, she aims it down at the ground. There's a boom, louder than the fall of a giant, and Rowan is in the air. From up here, she can see the threads of the curse coming together centered around the castle. When Rowan stayed with Royce the Weaver, she had warned that rest would come when it was least expected. Eldraine needed to rest, after so many dreams were shattered in the Phyrexian invasion. As does Rowan. One day, she would bring the blessed slumber to the rest of the realm. But for now, Rowan drifts to sleep. After the battle, High King Kenrtih takes Kellan and Ruby aside. He tells them he's never met children braver than they are, and that they're invited to come to the palace whenever they like. He seems distracted to Kellan, but if it was his sister who'd just done all that, Kellan would be a little distant too. As Ruby makes plans for her to visit the castle with her brother, Kellan slips away. Ruby deserved all the rewards she could get, facing down a witch with a sword of ice, saying well in a story. But now it was time for Kellan to face a truth he didn't think was promised. In a sleepy farm outside the even sleepier village of Oranshire, there's no talk of heroes. Kellan has never been so grateful for the distant sound of sheep's bleating as he walks down the path to his family's farm. When he walks by the Cotter boys, they glare at him just as they always did, but leave him be. He still fears them, even though he knows he shouldn't, for at least he knows he's strong enough now. Hex is the first of the family to greet him. The dog bounds across the rows of turnips, streaming drool behind him. Kellan lets out a sigh of relief as Hex licks his face. No matter where he's been or what he's discovered about himself, at least Hex still knows who he is. It isn't long before Hex's barking announces Kellan's presence to both his mother and stepfather. Kellan's parents run to him, and he stands in an embrace. He's finally home. When he walks into the house, his mother presents him a coat she's made for him, with vibrant threads ranging from deepest azures to the brightest of yellows. Embroidered through are elks frolicking around the elms, and the forests that surround Oranshire. Primroses bloom along the cuffs. Below a pocket, a girl sits before a pond of water, staring at her reflection. The lining shows the same girl following a man whose skin is streaked with blue. How long had she been spinning this for? How could she have possibly finished this in the time he was away? It was beautiful, so much so that he couldn't possibly wear it outside or get it dirty. As he embraces his mother, she smooths his hair and explains that she enchanted it. Kellan and his mother sit down at the table, and she wants to explain about her past. She supposed Kellan asked the Fae Lord about his birth father, but in truth, he hadn't. All he did was to ask Talion to send him home, so he could hear about his father from her. Tears well in his mother's eyes, and when she's ready, she begins to tell the story. Kellan's mother met his father during her training as a witch. She was out gathering nightshade when she found a man lying among the dangerous blossoms. He invited her to sit with him, and offered as much nightshade as she wanted in exchange for a conversation. Knowing he was a fae, she made him promise it was only a conversation. He told her his name was Oko, and newly arrived on Eldraine. He wanted to know more of the plane, and from a pretty girl, it was all the better. Kellan knew the blue-streaked man embroidered on his cloak is his father, this Oko, laying among the nightshade blossoms. His mother sighs, thinking it was the first time anyone had ever called her pretty. The realms outside of Eldraine were thrilling to her, so they exchanged stories. They talked among the flowers for hours, eventually realizing they would need to meet again. She couldn't remember the name of the realm that he came from, but Oko said the Fae reigned supreme there. He found the idea that humans should challenge the Fae of Eldraine very amusing, and lamented that he couldn't confront Lord Talion directly. Of course, back then they were young, and all young men talked that way. Over the next few years, they would meet in the Nightshade Glen, and he would come in many forms, and showed her many things. Without his aid, she would never have escaped her mistress, a terrible witch who was very cruel. For a while, the two of them went wherever they liked, and did whatever they pleased. He taught her more magic than her mistress witch ever could, and even promised her a throne, to make her a queen. Then, the trouble started. Though she had been freed from her witchcraft, the townsfolk thought once a witch, always a witch. They didn't want anything to do with her, which in turn upset Oko. Staying on Eldraine was wearing on him, and eventually he hurt people who had been unkind to her. She wanted badly to go away with him, but she couldn't. Thus was their personal curse. No matter how much they loved each other, they couldn't continue as they were. She wasn't meant to be a queen. After all that struggle, she just wanted peace. But he wanted to raze everything to the ground every time someone offended her. She admitted even after he left that Oko called on her again just 3 years ago while she was spinning in the night. The girl within her wanted to go to him, but the woman she became couldn't. Kellan listened, too intent to interrupt, looking over his coat. Kellan cannot sleep, stories of his father swirling in his head. He wonders how many times he may have seen him already. His mother said he liked to take many shapes. Maybe they've already met, but if so, why hadn't he introduced himself? Kellan wasn't brave enough to ask his mother, though the question kept him from rest. He decides to take a walk, and pulls on his new coat, stepping out into the darkness of the wilds. They used to frighten him, but not anymore. The woods would never betray him, so long as his blood smells of pine. Hex follows him, and Kellan can think of nothing to say to his old friend. His head was full of questions, and one shouldn't ask questions of an old bloodhound. After a few minutes, Hex bolts off, catching a scent, and Kellan chases after him. Over the boughs, past a prickly copse of yew, he finally catches up to Hex. The hound assumes a pointing position and barks, aiming straight for a portal? A swirling series of interlocking triangles stands beneath the swaying branches. This looks nothing like the portals to Lord Talion's realm, and on the other side, it looks nothing like Eldraine. Kellan remembers that Troyan told him about other realms. His mother too. Was this his father's way of reaching out? What if this is a test? What if his father lives out there, somewhere on the other side? Kellan steps forward. He isn't leaving home, he'll just be right back. He pets old Hex and steps through the portal. Arit hears a cool and familiar voice commanding her to wake. She wonders why it's been so long since she's heard this voice. When she opens her eyes, there's smoke billowing through the jail cell, despite the utter lack of wind. Ashiok stares at her, the smoke emitting from their translucent shrouds. Chains rattle as Arit stands, but the guards are not alerted. No doubt they're dreaming of something far more pleasant than guarding her. Ashiok tells her that plans need to be made. Arit asks where Rowan is, but Ashiok says that she's not ready for what's to come. Opportunity calls them in a new direction, one far from here, one far from Eldraine. Ashiok promises that she will learn much, and will be allowed to return to educate Rowan if she wishes. But then she would have the servants to attend her queendom while she was away. That information certainly soothes the matter. Rowan will be fine on her own for at least a while. Ashiok's hands hover over Arit's shackles, explaining just how far from here they were going to take her. Arit answers, telling Ashiok that that was a good thing. Ashiok didn't laugh, they never laughed. As the shackles fall to the stone floor, so too does darkness. In the morning, when the guards searched the cell, Arit was gone. And there you guys go, the complete Wilds of Eldraine story. There's a lot to dissect here and so much more to get into. This is the beginning of the Omen Path arc, and we're just now starting to realize what that could mean for the multiverse. I'll be making a video with my own thoughts and theories of Wilds of Eldraine's story and how it could impact the greater Magic the Gathering story in another video. For now though, I want to get your thoughts. Let me know your own theories in the comment section below. I again want to thank Wizard of the Coast and the author, Arsenault Rivera, for sponsoring this video and for giving me the opportunity to bring you this story. As always guys, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave this video a like, share it with friends, and become a subscriber. It all goes a long way in helping this channel grow. And until next time guys, see ya!